The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered hotel in Yreka, California, and Eleanor Kensington tumbled out with tears streaming down her face, her cream-colored traveling dress dusty and wrinkled from 3 days of hard travel across rough terrain in the scorching August heat of 1872. She collapsed onto the wooden boardwalk, her carefully packed trunk hitting the ground beside her with a heavy thud that sent up a cloud of dust. The driver simply tipped his hat and drove away without a word, leaving her alone in this unfamiliar town with nothing but broken promises and a heart full of rage. For 6 months, she had corresponded with Marcus Sullivan, a supposed gentleman who owned a mercantile in Yreka and promised her a comfortable life as his wife. He had written eloquent letters describing his successful business, his fine home, and his earnest desire for a respectable woman to share his life. The truth she discovered upon arriving at the address he had provided was far different. There was no mercantile at that location, only an abandoned building with boarded windows. When she inquired at the actual general store, the proprietor informed her that no one by the name of Marcus Sullivan existed in Yreka. She had been completely deceived, lured across the country by a man who never existed, or worse, a man who had deliberately tricked her for reasons she could not fathom. Eleanor sat on that boardwalk, her shoulders shaking with sobs, completely unaware that she was being watched. Vincent Ashford had been leading his horse toward the livery stable when he noticed the young woman's distress. He was a tall man in his late 20s with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His blue eyes held a mixture of kindness and wariness that came from years of surviving in the untamed territories of Northern California. He had worked as a ranch hand, a cattle driver, and occasionally helped the local sheriff when trouble arose, though he preferred the quiet life of tending horses and fixing fences on the small property he had managed to save up for over the years. Vincent was not the type to interfere in other people's business, but something about the sight of this woman, clearly a stranger to these parts, crying as though her heart had been torn in two, made him pause. "Madam," he said gently, approaching slowly so as not to startle her, "are you hurt?" Eleanor looked up, her green eyes red-rimmed and shining with tears. She quickly tried to compose herself, wiping at her face with a lace handkerchief that was already soaked through. "I am quite well, thank you," she said, though her voice trembled and contradicted her words entirely. Vincent crouched down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "With all due respect, madam, you do not look well at all. Can I help you with something? Are you waiting for someone?" The kindness in his voice was her undoing. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was waiting for someone," she said bitterly. "But he does not exist. I have been lied to and deceived, brought all this way on false pretenses." Understanding dawned on Vincent's face. He had heard of such schemes before, men who advertised for brides through letters and newspapers, sometimes with honorable intentions, sometimes not. "A mail-order arrangement?" he asked quietly. She nodded miserably. "I thought I was being so careful. We corresponded for months." His letters were so detailed, so convincing, and now I am here with nowhere to go and very little money remaining. Vincent felt a surge of anger toward the man who had done this, whoever he was. "What is your name, madam?" "Eleanor Kensington. I came from Boston." "That is a long journey," Vincent said. "I am Vincent Ashford. I work on a ranch just outside town." He stood and offered her his hand. "Let me help you up. You cannot sit on the boardwalk all evening." Eleanor hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. He helped her to her feet and retrieved her trunk as though it weighed nothing. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over," Vincent said. It is run by Mrs. Patterson, a widow who keeps a clean establishment. Let me take you there and we can figure out what to do next. I cannot impose, Eleanor began, but Vincent shook his head. It is no imposition. I will not leave a woman stranded in the street. Yreka is generally a decent town, but it is still the frontier, and a woman alone is vulnerable. Eleanor fell into step beside him, trying to regain some composure. She studied him from the corner of her eye as they walked. He was handsome in a rugged way, completely different from the refined gentleman she had known in Boston. There was something solid about him, dependable. But then again, she had thought Marcus Sullivan's letters sounded dependable too, and look where that had gotten her. Mrs. Patterson was a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Eleanor over carefully when they arrived at her door. "Vincent Ashford, what have you brought me?" "This is Miss Kensington from Boston," Vincent said. "She has had some trouble and needs a room." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "Come in, dear. You look absolutely done in." She quoted her rates, which were reasonable, and Eleanor calculated that she had enough money to stay for perhaps 2 weeks if she was very careful. Once, Eleanor was settled in a small but clean room. Vincent waited downstairs in the parlor. When she came down, having washed her face and changed into a fresh dress, he stood politely. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Ashford," Eleanor said formally. "I apologize for the scene I caused." "You have nothing to apologize for," Vincent said. "What happened to you is not right." "Have you eaten today?" Eleanor realized she had not. The last meal she had taken was a hurried breakfast at a stage stop early that morning. "I have not." "Then let me buy you supper. There is a restaurant across the street that serves decent food. You need to eat, and we can talk about what you might do next." Eleanor wanted to refuse out of pride, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Vincent smiled slightly, and despite everything, she found herself almost smiling back. "Very well, thank you." The restaurant was busy with the dinner crowd, mostly miners and ranch hands. Eleanor felt out of place in her fine dress, but Vincent led her to a quieter table near the back. They ordered stew and fresh bread, and as they waited for the food, Vincent asked, "Do you have family back in Boston who you can return to?" Eleanor's expression clouded. "My parents died 2 years ago. I have been living with my aunt, but she made it clear I was a burden. When the opportunity to marry seemed to present itself, she encouraged me to take it." She paused. "Actually, encouraged is too gentle a word. She pushed me toward it quite forcefully." "So going back is not an option," Vincent said thoughtfully. "I would rather do almost anything than return to live under her roof again," Eleanor said with feeling. "But I do not know what I can do here. I have no skills that would serve me in a place like this. I can embroider and paint watercolors and play the piano, but those talents seem rather useless in a mining town." "Can you read and write well?" Vincent asked. "Of course. I attended an excellent girls' academy." "Then you have skills." "The school teacher in Yreka, Mr. Henderson, is getting old and has been talking about retiring. The town has been looking for someone to take over teaching the children. The pay is not much, but it includes a small cottage." Hope flickered in Eleanor's eyes for the first time since arriving. "Do you truly think they would consider me?" "I do not see why not. Yreka needs educated people. Most folks here are more concerned with finding gold or raising cattle than with book learning, but they want their children to have opportunities." The food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly in Vincent's presence. He did not press her with questions or offer empty platitudes. He simply helped her in practical ways, which she appreciated more than she could say. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked suddenly. "You do not know me at all." Vincent set down his spoon and met her eyes. Because someone should be. You were treated badly, and that is not right. I was raised to help people when I can." He paused. "And I suppose I know what it is like to be disappointed by someone you trusted." "You do?" Eleanor asked softly. "My father," Vincent said quietly. "He was a gambler and a drunk, made promises all the time, never kept a single one. My mother worked herself to death trying to make up for his failings. When she died, I was 16. My father disappeared shortly after, probably into a bottle or a card game somewhere. I have not seen him in over 10 years, and I do not care to." "I am sorry," Eleanor said, and meant it. "It taught me something valuable, though," Vincent said. "It taught me that a person's words should mean something. When I tell someone I will do something, I do it. And I do not lie, because I saw what lies and broken promises did to my mother." There was such conviction in his voice that Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. "That is a good way to live," she said. "It is the only way I know how to live," Vincent replied. Then he looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. "I will help you get settled here in Yreka, Miss Kensington. I will introduce you to people who can help you find work. And I promise you this, I will never lie to you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the bitter, angry tears she had shed earlier. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something she could not quite name. "Thank you," she whispered. "I believe you." And somehow, despite everything she had been through, despite the lies that had brought her to this rough frontier town, she did believe him. Over the next few days, Vincent proved true to his word. He introduced Eleanor to Mr. Henderson, the elderly schoolteacher, who was delighted to meet someone with proper education and excellent references from her academy in Boston. Mr. Henderson agreed to recommend her to the town council, though the formal decision would take a few weeks. In the meantime, Vincent found her temporary work helping Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house. Eleanor cleaned rooms, helped with laundry, and assisted with cooking. The work was harder than anything she had done in her life, but she found a strange satisfaction in it. Each task completed was tangible proof of her independence, her ability to survive on her own. Vincent visited nearly every day, always with some excuse. He needed to speak with Mrs. Patterson about boarding a friend, or he was in town picking up supplies, or he had heard news about the teaching position. Eleanor suspected these were not always entirely truthful reasons, but she found she did not mind. She had begun to look forward to seeing him, to the sound of his boots on the porch, to the way his eyes sought her out when he entered a room, one afternoon. About a week after her arrival, Vincent appeared with a horse saddled and ready. "I thought you might like to see something other than the inside of this boarding house," he said. "If you can spare a few hours, I would like to show you the country around here." Eleanor hesitated. "I do not ride," she admitted. "I never learned. You can ride with me," Vincent said. "My horse is steady, and I will not let you fall." Mrs. Patterson, who had been listening from the kitchen, called out, "Go on, dear. You have been working hard. A bit of fresh air will do you good." So Eleanor found herself mounted in front of Vincent on his large bay gelding, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. She was acutely aware of his closeness, the solid warmth of him at her back, the way his chest moved with each breath. They rode out of town and into the hills surrounding Yreka. The landscape was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that was completely foreign to Eleanor. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Pine trees grew thick on the slopes, and the air smelled of sage and dust, and something clean she could not quite identify. Vincent showed her a creek where the water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. They dismounted, and he helped her down with his hands on her waist, steadying her when she stumbled slightly. For a moment, they stood close together, and Eleanor's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes before he stepped back politely. They sat by the creek, and Vincent told her about the area, about the gold rush that had brought so many people to Northern California, about the native tribes who had lived here long before, about the harsh winters and the beauty of spring when wildflowers covered the meadows. Eleanor found herself telling him about Boston, about her childhood, about her parents and how much she missed them. She told him about her aunt's coldness, about feeling unwanted and burdensome, about the desperate hope she had felt when Marcus Sullivan's letters began arriving. "I was so foolish," she said bitterly. "I should have known it was too good to be true." "You were not foolish," Vincent said firmly. "You were hopeful, and there is nothing wrong with that. The fault lies entirely with whoever deceived you. But I let myself be deceived. Because you wanted to believe in goodness and possibility. That does not make you foolish, Eleanor. That makes you human." It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his deep voice sent warmth through her. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the kindness and strength there, the honesty. This was a man who kept his word, who helped without expecting anything in return, who had shown her more genuine care in a week than her own aunt had in 2 years. "May I ask you something?" Eleanor said. "Anything? Why have you never married? Surely there are women in Yreka who would be interested in a man like you." Vincent smiled slightly. "A man like me, a drifter who owns little more than a horse and some borrowed land, a man who is kind and honest and hardworking," Eleanor corrected. "Those qualities are worth more than gold." He was quiet for a moment, trailing his fingers in the cold creek water. "I suppose I never found someone I wanted to build a life with, and I am not easy to live with, I think. I like my solitude, my routines. I have seen too many marriages based on convenience or desperation, and I did not want that." "What would you want?" Eleanor asked softly. Vincent turned to look at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "I would want someone who saw me clearly, flaws and all, and chose me anyway. Someone I could trust completely. Someone who made the solitude feel lonely instead of peaceful." He paused. "I never felt that before." The unspoken words hung between them. Before now, before you, Eleanor's heart was racing. This was happening too fast, she told herself. She had been in Yreka for barely a week. She had just escaped one disastrous romantic entanglement. She should be cautious, guarded. But when Vincent reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her cheek, caution fled. She leaned into his touch and he drew her closer slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not pull away. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I know this is sudden," he murmured. "And if you want me to step back, I will. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. I have never felt this way about anyone." "I feel it too," Eleanor whispered. "It frightens me." "It frightens me as well," Vincent admitted. "But I meant what I said. I will never lie to you, Eleanor. Not about this, not about anything." They stayed by the creek until the sun began to sink toward the mountains, talking and sometimes simply sitting in comfortable silence. When they rode back to town, Eleanor felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. She had come to Yreka in despair, certain her life was ruined. Now, with Vincent's arms around her and the possibility of a future stretching before her, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. The town council approved Eleanor's appointment as the new schoolteacher 3 weeks after her arrival. Mr. Henderson spent another month training her, introducing her to the students and their families, showing her the curriculum he had developed over his years of teaching. The cottage that came with the position was small but charming, with 2 rooms and a little garden plot behind it. Vincent helped her move in, carrying her trunk and the few pieces of furniture donated by townspeople. He built shelves for her books, repaired a loose board on the porch, and fixed the chimney so it would draw properly when winter came. Eleanor threw herself into teaching with the same determination she had shown in every other aspect of her new life. Her students ranged from 6-year-old twins learning their letters to a gangly 15-year-old boy who needed help with mathematics. She was patient and creative, finding ways to make lessons engaging even for the children who would rather be outside playing or helping with ranch work. She and Vincent saw each other nearly every day. He would stop by the schoolhouse during his lunch break, or she would walk out to the small property he leased on the edge of town after school let out. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds and hearts. Vincent told her about his dreams of buying his own ranch someday, a place with good water and grazing land where he could raise horses. Eleanor told him about her love of reading, how books had been her escape during the lonely years with her aunt. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch of her cottage watching the stars emerge, Vincent said, "I want to court you properly, Eleanor, with the intention of marriage if you will have me." Eleanor's heart soared, but she needed to be certain. "You are sure?" "We come from such different worlds, Vincent. What if I cannot adapt to this life? What if I disappoint you?" He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You have already adapted. You are one of the strongest people I know. As for disappointing me, that is impossible." "I see who you are, Eleanor. I see your courage and your determination and your kind heart. That is who I fell in love with." "You love me," she breathed. "I do," he said simply. "I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy. "I love you too. I think I started falling for you that first day when you helped me up from the boardwalk and promised to never lie to me. Then you will let me court you." "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Eleanor felt as though she were flying. This was what she had been searching for all along, not the hollow promises in Marcus Sullivan's letters, but this real, solid, honest love with a man who saw her truly and loved her anyway. The courtship was proper by frontier standards, which meant less chaperone than it would have been in Boston, but still respectable. Vincent took Eleanor to church socials and community dances. They went on long rides into the countryside, and he taught her to sit a horse properly, laughing good-naturedly when she bounced awkwardly in the saddle at first. Eleanor met Vincent's friends, the other ranch hands and townspeople who had known him for years. To a person, they told her she was good for him, that they had never seen him so happy. Mrs. Patterson became a surrogate mother to Eleanor, offering advice on everything from cooking to managing a household. "That boy is head over heels for you," she told Eleanor one afternoon while they were shelling peas on the boarding house porch, "and you are just as smitten with him." "I am," Eleanor admitted, smiling. "Is that foolish, to fall in love so quickly?" "Love does not run on a schedule, dear Mrs. Patterson said. "Sometimes it takes years to grow. Sometimes it hits you like lightning. What matters is what you do with it." As autumn turned the leaves gold and sent a chill into the air, Vincent and Eleanor's relationship deepened. They had their first real argument in October, when Eleanor insisted on walking home alone after dark from a meeting at the church, and Vincent thought it was too dangerous. They both said things in frustration, and Eleanor went to bed angry. But the next morning, Vincent was waiting outside the schoolhouse with a bunch of late-blooming wildflowers. "I am sorry," he said. "I was overbearing. I worry about you, but that does not give me the right to order you around." "I am sorry too," Eleanor said, taking the flowers. "I was stubborn just to be stubborn. You were right that it is not safe. They talked it through, learning how to communicate better, how to respect each other's independence while still caring for one another. It was a small argument, easily resolved, but it taught them both that their love was strong enough to weather disagreement. In November, Vincent took Eleanor to meet the family who owned the ranch where he worked. The Carmichaels were good people, with 3 children and a 4th on the way. Mrs. Carmichael took to Eleanor immediately, and by the end of the visit, she was pulling Eleanor aside to whisper, "When that man proposes, you say yes. He is one of the finest men I know." "I intend to," Eleanor whispered back, and they both laughed. Winter came to the mountains, bringing snow and ice. The schoolhouse was cold despite the wood stove, and Eleanor's students came bundled in layers of clothing. She taught them while wearing mittens with the fingers cut out so she could still write on the slate board. Vincent appeared every few days to check on her, always bringing firewood or food or simply his presence. On the coldest nights, when frost painted the windows in intricate patterns, Eleanor would lie in her bed and think about him, imagining a future where he would be there beside her, keeping her warm. Christmas was unlike anything Eleanor had experienced before. In Boston, the holiday had been formal and restrained. Here in Yreka, it was a community celebration with music and laughter and genuine warmth. Vincent gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal, and she gave him a scarf she had knitted herself, despite having to learn how from Mrs. Patterson because her aunt had never taught her such practical skills. They stood together at the Christmas dance, swaying to fiddle music, and Vincent murmured in her ear, "Next Christmas, I want you to be my wife." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "Is that a proposal, Vincent Ashford?" He smiled, that slow smile that made her heart flutter. "Not yet. When I propose, you will know it, but I wanted you to know my intentions." "My intentions are the same," she said softly. "I cannot imagine my future without you in it." January brought a cold snap that froze the creek solid. Eleanor's students were restless, tired of being cooped up indoors. She took them outside for lessons when the weather permitted, teaching them about the winter constellations and how animals survived the cold. One afternoon, Vincent arrived at the schoolhouse with urgent news. "There is a bad storm coming," he said. "The worst we have seen in years, according to the old-timers. You need to come stay at the boarding house until it passes. Your cottage is not sturdy enough." Eleanor looked at her little home with its thin walls and felt a pang of worry. "What about you?" "I will be at the ranch. We have to bring the horses into the barn and secure everything." He took her hands. "Promise me you will go to Mrs. Patterson's. Do not try to wait it out here." "I promise," Eleanor said. The storm hit that night with a fury that shocked even the longtime residents of Yreka. Snow fell so thick you could not see across the street. Wind howled like a living thing, rattling windows and tearing at roofs. Eleanor huddled in her old room at the boarding house, grateful for Vincent's foresight but worried about him out at the ranch. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally cleared, the town was buried under several feet of snow. People dug out slowly, checking on neighbors, assessing damage. Eleanor's cottage had lost part of its roof, and her heart sank when she saw it. But Vincent was already there, along with several other men from town, working to repair the damage. When he saw her, he jumped down from the roof and pulled her into a fierce hug. "Thank God you were not here," he said into her hair. "A branch came through right above where your bed is." Eleanor clung to him, shaking at the thought of what might have happened. "Are you all right? Were you safe?" "I am fine. The ranch came through with minimal damage." He pulled back to look at her. "Your cottage will be repaired in a few days. Until then, stay with Mrs. Patterson." True to his word, Vincent and his friends had the cottage restored within a week, but the experience had shaken Eleanor. She realized how precarious her situation was, living alone in a rough country where nature itself could be an enemy. February came, bringing slightly warmer weather and the first hints that spring would eventually return. Valentine's Day was not widely celebrated in Yreka, but Vincent made it special anyway. He took Eleanor on a sleigh ride borrowed from the Carmichaels, bundled under furs against the cold. They stopped at a place overlooking the valley, where the snow-covered landscape glittered in the afternoon sun. Vincent helped Eleanor down from the sleigh and turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Eleanor Kensington," he said, his voice serious but his eyes warm. "I told you once that I would court you with the intention of marriage. I have spent the last 5 months falling more in love with you every single day. You are brave and smart and kind, and you make me want to be a better man." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "This was my mother's ring," he said. "It is not fancy, but it is the most precious thing I own. I would be honored if you would wear it and be my wife." Eleanor was crying, tears freezing on her cheeks in the cold air. "Yes," she said, laughing and sobbing at the same time. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and Eleanor thought she might die from the sheer joy of it all. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Yreka in tears, betrayed and alone. Now she was engaged to the most wonderful man she had ever known, building a life in this wild, beautiful place. "I have something to tell you," Vincent said as they held each other. "I have been saving money for years, and Mr. Carmichael has agreed to sell me a parcel of his land. Not huge, but enough for a small ranch. We can build a house there, start our own place." "Truly?" Eleanor asked, delighted. "Truly? I want to build a life with you, Eleanor, a real life, a home." They set the wedding date for May, when the wildflowers would be blooming and the weather would be mild. The preparations kept Eleanor busy alongside her teaching duties. Mrs. Patterson helped her sew a wedding dress from fabric ordered from San Francisco, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Vincent worked on the land he had purchased, beginning to clear a spot for their house. He came to dinner at Eleanor's cottage most evenings, and they would plan their future together, talking about how many rooms the house should have, where to put the barn, what kind of horses to raise. In April, Eleanor received a letter that nearly stopped her heart. It was from her aunt in Boston, forwarded through the boarding house. With trembling hands, she opened it. The letter was brief and cold. Her aunt had heard from an acquaintance that Eleanor was alive and well in California, apparently engaged to be married. She wrote that Eleanor was a disgrace for running off like she had, for worrying people. She demanded that Eleanor return to Boston immediately to explain herself. Eleanor read the letter twice, feeling the old familiar guilt and shame rising up. Then she thought of Vincent, of his promise to never lie to her, of the honest, good life they were building. She thought of her students and her little cottage and the community that had welcomed her. She folded the letter, walked to the stove, and dropped it in the fire. She watched it burn to ash, and with it, the last ties to her old life and the woman who had made her feel worthless. When Vincent arrived that evening, she told him about the letter and what she had done. He pulled her close and said, "You are not that woman anymore. You are Eleanor Kensington, schoolteacher, my future wife, the strongest person I know. You do not owe her anything." "I know," Eleanor said. "I finally know that." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. The whole town seemed invested in their happiness. Mrs. Carmichael organized a quilting bee to make Eleanor and Vincent a wedding quilt. The students at the school made decorations for the ceremony. Even the gruff old miners who frequented the saloon contributed money to buy the couple a new set of dishes. Eleanor had never felt so embraced by a community. These people, most of whom had been strangers 6 months ago, had become her family. The night before the wedding, as was tradition, Eleanor and Vincent spent apart. Eleanor stayed at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, surrounded by the women who had become her friends. They told stories and laughed late into the night, offering advice both practical and scandalous. Eleanor lay awake after everyone had gone to bed, too excited to sleep. Tomorrow she would marry Vincent. Tomorrow her new life would truly begin. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the lies that had led her to Yreka, the tears she had shed on that dusty boardwalk. She would not change a thing. Every hardship, every moment of despair, had led her to Vincent and to this life. She had learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us open the door to the best things. The morning of May 15th dawned clear and beautiful. Eleanor dressed in her new gown, and Mrs. Patterson helped arrange her hair, weaving in small white flowers that Vincent had picked at dawn. When Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the frightened, tearful girl who had stumbled off the stagecoach. In her place was a confident woman about to marry the man she loved. The ceremony was held at the small church in Yreka, packed with what seemed like the entire town. Eleanor walked down the aisle alone, head held high, choosing Vincent of her own free will with no one to give her away, because she belonged to herself. Vincent stood at the altar in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes fixed on her with such love that Eleanor felt her breath catch. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You are beautiful." The preacher performed the ceremony, speaking about love and commitment and partnership. When it came time for the vows, Vincent spoke clearly and firmly, promising to love and cherish Eleanor, to be faithful and true, to build a life with her based on honesty and respect. Eleanor made her own promises, her voice steady despite the tears of joy streaming down her face. She promised to stand beside Vincent in good times and bad, to be his partner and his friend, to love him all the days of her life. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her to the cheers and applause of the whole congregation. Eleanor laughed against his lips, overwhelmed with happiness. The reception was held in the town hall, with music and dancing and more food than Eleanor had ever seen. She danced with Vincent, with Mr. Henderson, with Mr. Carmichael, with practically every man in Yreka. Vincent danced with Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Carmichael and all the ladies, but his eyes kept finding Eleanor across the room, and the love in his gaze made her heart soar. As evening fell, they left the celebration and rode out to their land, to the small cabin Vincent had been building. It was not finished yet, but it had a roof and a door and a bed, and that was all they needed. Vincent carried Eleanor over the threshold, and they both laughed at the tradition. He set her down gently, and they stood in the middle of their new home holding each other. "Hello, Mrs. Ashford," Vincent said softly. "Hello, Mr. Ashford," Eleanor replied, smiling up at him. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and Eleanor discovered depths of joy and intimacy she had never imagined. Vincent was gentle and patient, whispering words of love and reassurance, making sure she felt cherished and safe. In his arms, Eleanor finally understood what it meant to be truly known and truly loved. The next months were a whirlwind of building and planning. Vincent continued to work for Mr. Carmichael while spending every spare moment on their ranch. Eleanor taught through the end of the school year, then spent her summer helping with the construction and beginning to set up their home. They worked side by side, and Eleanor learned skills she had never dreamed of knowing. She helped Vincent raise the walls of their house, learning to hammer nails and measure boards. She planted a garden, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil. She learned to cook over an open fire and to preserve food for the winter. It was hard work, harder than anything she had ever done, and she loved every minute of it. She loved watching their home take shape, loved the satisfaction of eating vegetables she had grown herself, loved falling into bed exhausted next to her husband every night. In September, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening as they sat on the porch of their nearly completed house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Vincent went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes wide with wonder and a bit of fear. "Truly, truly. I am about 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in the spring." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We are going to have a family." "We are," Eleanor said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Vincent said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I promise you, little one, I will be the best father I can be. I will never lie to you, never break my promises to you." Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "I know you will. You are going to be a wonderful father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Eleanor continued teaching until December, when her condition became too obvious to ignore. The school board hired a temporary replacement for the rest of the year, with the understanding that Eleanor could return after the baby was born if she wished. Winter came again, but this time Eleanor was not alone in a drafty cottage. She was in a sturdy house built by her husband's hands, with a good stove and thick walls and glass in the windows. Vincent doted on her, bringing her anything she needed, worrying over every twinge and ache. "I am fine," Eleanor would tell him, laughing. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "But they were not having my baby," Vincent would reply, and Eleanor would kiss him and tell him she loved him. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first green shoots appeared in the garden, Eleanor's time came. Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Carmichael attended her, while Vincent paced outside, nearly wearing a path in the muddy ground. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Eleanor wondered if she would survive it. But she thought of Vincent, of the life they had built, of the future stretching before them, and she pushed through the pain and exhaustion. Just before dawn on a cold March morning, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, his little fists waving in indignation at being evicted from his warm home. Mrs. Carmichael cleaned him up and wrapped him in a soft blanket while Mrs. Patterson tended to Eleanor. When Vincent was finally allowed in, he approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. Eleanor held out their son, and Vincent took him with shaking hands. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, staring down at the baby's tiny face. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Eleanor asked, exhausted but happy. Vincent thought for a moment. "What about Samuel? After your father?" Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. Vincent had remembered the name of her father, whom she had told him about in one of their many conversations. "Samuel Vincent Ashford," she said. "It is perfect." Little Samuel proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who rarely slept for more than 2 hours at a stretch. Those early months were exhausting, but they were also filled with joy. Vincent was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always soothed Samuel to sleep. Eleanor watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. He was so gentle, so patient, so full of love for this tiny person who depended on them completely. By the time Samuel was 6 months old, Eleanor had returned to teaching part-time, leaving the baby with Mrs. Patterson during school hours. Their ranch was starting to show real progress. Vincent had purchased 3 mares and a good stallion, and they were beginning to build a reputation for quality horses. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked hard, raised their son, supported each other through the challenges that came with frontier life. There were difficult times. A harsh winter when they lost one of the mares, a summer drought that withered half their garden, a bout of illness that swept through the town and left Eleanor weak for weeks. But they faced everything together, and their love only grew stronger. Vincent kept his promise. He never lied to Eleanor, not even about small things. If she asked his opinion, he gave it honestly. If he made a promise, he kept it. The foundation of trust between them was unshakable. When Samuel was 2 years old, Eleanor found herself pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed easier. Their daughter was born on a warm summer evening, with far less difficulty than Samuel's birth had involved. They named her Rose Marie, and she had Vincent's blue eyes and Eleanor's dark hair. With 2 children and a growing ranch, life became even busier. Samuel was a curious, energetic toddler who got into everything. Rose was a placid baby who rarely cried and seemed content to watch the world around her with wide, wondering eyes. Eleanor gave up teaching to focus on the ranch and the children. She missed her students, but she found satisfaction in building something lasting with Vincent, in raising their children to be honest and kind and strong. The years passed quickly. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses as much as his father did. By the time he was 5, he was helping Vincent in the stables, learning to groom and feed the animals. Rose was more interested in the garden, spending hours helping Eleanor plant and weed and harvest. When Samuel was 6 and Rose was 4, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant for a 3rd time. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Eleanor felt exhausted all the time. Vincent worried over her, insisting she rest more, taking over many of her chores. Their 3rd child, a boy they named James, was born in the winter of 1880. The birth was difficult, and the doctor told Eleanor that she should not have any more children. It was dangerous, he said, given the complications she had experienced. Eleanor grieved a little for the large family she had imagined, but she looked at her 3 beautiful children and her devoted husband, and she knew she had more than she had ever dreamed possible. James was a cheerful baby who laughed easily and charmed everyone he met. By the time he could walk, he was following Samuel around like a devoted shadow, trying to copy everything his big brother did. The ranch prospered. Vincent's horses were in demand throughout Northern California, and they were finally financially secure. They built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Eleanor ordered furniture from San Francisco, and Vincent built a bookshelf for the growing collection of books they were accumulating. One evening when Samuel was 10, Rose was 8, and James was 4, the family sat together in the parlor after dinner. Vincent was teaching Samuel to play chess, while Eleanor helped Rose with her embroidery. James was building an elaborate structure with wooden blocks that collapsed repeatedly, but he rebuilt it each time with tireless determination. Eleanor looked around at her family, at this life she had built, and felt a wave of contentment so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Vincent looked up and saw her expression. He stood and crossed to her, crouching beside her chair. "What is wrong?" he asked softly. "Nothing," Eleanor said, smiling through her tears. "Absolutely nothing. I am just so happy." Vincent took her hand and kissed it. "So am I." "Do you remember the day we met?" Eleanor asked. "When I arrived in Yreka in tears because I had been lied to." "I remember," Vincent said. "You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even with your face all red from crying." Eleanor laughed. "You told me you would never lie to me." And I never have, Vincent said seriously. Not once in all these years. I know, Eleanor said. That promise, that simple promise, it changed my life. It gave me the courage to trust again, to love again. You gave me something too, Vincent said. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, a reason to hope for the future. Before you, I was just existing. You made me truly live. They kissed, a gentle kiss full of years of love and trust and partnership, while their children made exaggerated gagging noises in the background. As the years continued to pass, the Ashford family became a cornerstone of the Yreka community. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over much of the horse training, showing a natural talent that surpassed even Vincent's. Rose became known for her beautiful garden and her skill at preserving food, and she helped the family through more than one difficult winter with her careful planning. James, true to his cheerful nature, became the social one of the family, making friends everywhere he went and serving as a bridge between the ranch and the town. Eleanor and Vincent grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges, droughts and floods, illness and injury, the ordinary struggles of life. But they faced everything together, and the promise Vincent had made that first day held true through it all. He never lied to her. Not about the big things, not about the small things. When she asked if a dress looked good on her, he told her the truth. When she asked if he was worried about money, he shared his concerns instead of hiding them to protect her. When she asked if he was happy, he answered with complete honesty. And that honesty created a foundation so strong that nothing could shake it. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Eleanor with a trip back to the spot where he had first kissed her, by the creek in the hills above Yreka. The landscape had not changed much, though they certainly had. Both of them showed the marks of 2 decades of hard work and life in a harsh land. They sat by the creek, holding hands, and Vincent said, "Do you ever regret it? Staying here instead of going back to Boston? Living this hard life instead of an easier one?" Eleanor looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? Vincent, this is the life I was meant to live. You are the man I was meant to love. I would not change a single thing. Even the hard parts. The times when we nearly lost the ranch, when we were so poor we did not know how we would feed the children. Even those parts," Eleanor said firmly. "They made us stronger, and we always got through them together." Vincent smiled and pulled her close. "I love you, Eleanor Ashford. More today than when we married, and I loved you quite a lot even then." "I love you too," Eleanor said. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for never lying to me." "That is the easiest promise I have ever kept," Vincent said, "because I never had a reason to lie to you. You have always accepted me exactly as I am." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat together in the place where their love had first bloomed, grateful for the journey that had brought them together and the years that stretched behind them. The years continued to unfold. Samuel married a local girl named Lucy, and they built their own home on a portion of the Ashford land. They gave Eleanor and Vincent their first grandchildren, twin girls who were the absolute joy of their grandparents' lives. Rose fell in love with a teacher who moved to Yreka from Sacramento, and Eleanor had the pleasure of helping her daughter plan a wedding just as beautiful as her own had been. Rose and her husband settled in town, and Rose began teaching at the very school where Eleanor had once worked. James, restless and adventurous, left Yreka to seek his fortune in San Francisco, but he wrote regularly and visited whenever he could. His letters were full of excitement and new experiences, and while Eleanor missed him terribly, she was proud of his courage in pursuing his own path. As Eleanor and Vincent entered their 50s, they began to slow down. The ranch was largely run by Samuel now, though Vincent still could not stay away from the horses entirely. Eleanor had more time for reading and for her garden, and for spoiling her growing number of grandchildren. One evening in the spring of 1897, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times before. Eleanor rested her head on Vincent's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and horses and the soap he used. "We have had a good life, have we not?" she said softly. "The best life," Vincent agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you remember what I looked like when you first saw me?" Eleanor asked with a laugh. "Crying on the boardwalk, my dress all dusty, my face a mess. You were beautiful," Vincent said. "I took one look at you and felt something shift in my chest. I knew even then that you were going to be important to me." "I thought you were the kindest man I had ever met," Eleanor said. "And the most handsome, though I tried not to notice that at first." Vincent chuckled. "I noticed you noticing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. After a while, Eleanor said, "I used to think that Marcus Sullivan ruining my life was the worst thing that could happen to me, but it turned out to be the best thing. Because it brought me here to you." "I am glad he lied to you," Vincent said, "though I would never tell him that if I could, but his lie brought you to me and my truth kept you here." "Your truth and your love," Eleanor corrected. "Those are what built this life we share." Vincent turned to her, his blue eyes still as striking as they had been 25 years ago, though now surrounded by laugh lines and weathered by years of sun and wind. "I love you, Eleanor. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Eleanor said. "Thank you for being the man you are. Thank you for keeping every promise. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two people who had built a lifetime together on a foundation of honesty and trust and unwavering devotion. As the 20th century approached, bringing changes that would transform even the remote corners of California, Eleanor and Vincent faced it together, as they had faced everything. The world around them might change, but what they had built between them was timeless and unshakable. Samuel took over the ranch completely when Vincent's joints became too stiff for the hard physical labor. Rose's children grew, and some of them began attending the school where their mother taught. James eventually returned from San Francisco with a wife and a newfound appreciation for the quiet life, and he built a house near his parents. Eleanor and Vincent became the patriarch and matriarch of a growing family, respected elders whose love story was known throughout Yreka. People would point them out to newcomers, telling the tale of how Eleanor had arrived in town in tears, deceived and alone, and how Vincent had promised to never lie to her and had kept that promise for over 30 years. Their story became a kind of legend, a reminder that true love was possible even in the hardest of circumstances, that honesty and trust could build something that would last. On their 35th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, filling the house with noise and laughter. Eleanor looked around at all these people who existed because she had stumbled off a stagecoach in tears all those years ago, and she marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. Vincent found her standing alone in the garden, taking a moment of quiet amidst the chaos. He slipped his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him as naturally as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how lost I was when I arrived here," Eleanor said. "About how certain I was that my life was ruined, and about how wrong I was." "You were never lost," Vincent said. "You were exactly where you needed to be. You just did not know it yet." "I suppose that is true," Eleanor agreed, "but I needed you to show me that." "We showed each other," Vincent said. You taught me how to open my heart, how to trust someone completely. We built this together, Eleanor." That night, after the guests had all gone home and the house was quiet, Eleanor and Vincent sat together on their bed, the same bed they had shared for 35 years. Eleanor took Vincent's hand, feeling the calluses and scars that told the story of his hard work and devotion. "I want you to know something," she said. "In all these years, through all the challenges and changes, I have never once regretted my decision to stay here, to marry you, to build this life. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vincent Ashford." Vincent's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor. You took a lonely cowboy with nothing but a horse and some dreams, and you made him into a husband, a father, a grandfather. You made him into a man with a real home and a real family. I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," Eleanor said firmly. "We gave each other everything freely with love. That is what makes it beautiful." They held each other close, two hearts that had beaten as one for 35 years, two souls that had found their perfect match in the most unlikely of circumstances. The years that followed were gentle ones. Eleanor and Vincent spent their days in quiet contentment, surrounded by family, watching their grandchildren grow. They took walks together when Vincent's joints allowed it, worked in the garden together, read books aloud to each other in the evenings. On a warm summer evening in 1905, as the sun set over the mountains they had looked at together for nearly 40 years, Vincent and Eleanor sat on their porch one last time. Vincent had been ill for several weeks, his strong body finally succumbing to the accumulation of years and hard living. Eleanor knew the end was near and her heart was breaking, but she kept her face calm and loving for him. "I kept my promise," Vincent said, his voice weak but clear. "I never lied to you, Eleanor, not once." "I know," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face, "and it made all the difference. It gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "I love you," Vincent whispered. "Tell the children and grandchildren I love them. Tell them to live honestly, to keep their promises." "I will," Eleanor promised, "but you can tell them yourself when you are feeling better." Vincent smiled slightly, and they both knew it was a gentle fiction, one last kindness between them. "I am glad you arrived in Yreka in tears that day," he said. "I am glad I found you." "I am glad you found me too," Eleanor said. "I am glad you kept your promise." "I am glad for every single moment we had together." Vincent closed his eyes, still holding her hand. "The best life," he murmured. "We had the best life." Those were his last words. He slipped away peacefully, his hand in Eleanor's, surrounded by the love they had built together. Eleanor sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, crying for the man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her everything. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire town of Yreka and beyond. People came from all over to pay their respects to Vincent Ashford, the honest man, the good man, the man who had built a legacy not just in horses and land, but in love and integrity. Eleanor stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and she said her final goodbye to the man who had been her partner for nearly 40 years. She placed a single white rose on his coffin, the same kind of flower he had picked for her hair on their wedding day. After Vincent's death, Eleanor lived on at the ranch with Samuel and his family. She spent her remaining years as the beloved matriarch of the Ashford clan, telling stories about Vincent to anyone who would listen, making sure his memory and his values lived on. She told her grandchildren about the promise he had made. "I will never lie to you." She told them how that simple promise had built a foundation of trust that had sustained them through everything. She told them that honesty and integrity were worth more than gold, that keeping your word was the measure of a person's character. On a spring morning in 1912, Eleanor Ashford passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68. She was buried beside Vincent, and on their shared headstone the family had inscribed, "Together in truth and love." But the story did not end there. The values that Vincent and Eleanor had lived by, the love they had built, the legacy of honesty and trust, continued through their children and grandchildren. The ranch they had started grew and prospered, passed down through generations. And in Yreka, for many years to come, when people spoke of true love, they spoke of Eleanor and Vincent Ashford. They told the story of a woman who arrived in tears, deceived and alone, and a cowboy who said, "I will never lie to you," and kept that promise until his dying day. It became a story that inspired others, a reminder that even in the hardest of circumstances, love could bloom. That honesty could build something lasting. That two people, meeting by chance on a dusty frontier street, could create a love story for the ages. The little cottage where Eleanor had first lived still stood for many years, and the creek where Vincent first kissed her still ran clear and cold. The ranch they built together became a landmark, and their descendants carried on their legacy, teaching their own children about the importance of truth and trust and keeping your promises. In the end, Eleanor's arrival in Yreka in tears, the result of a cruel deception, had been the beginning of something beautiful. And Vincent's simple promise, "I will never lie to you," had been the foundation of a love that transcended time, that inspired generations, that proved what was possible when two people committed to building a life together based on honesty and unwavering devotion. Their story lived on, a testament to the transformative power of truth and love, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be, and that a promise kept can build a legacy that lasts forever.